Why the confidence that either government regulators or the talking heads assembled there would do a better job of controlling the discourse in a way that doesn't have massive blind spots and prevents us from talking about things we ought to be able to talk about that are in the public interest, because they show, and I talked about this on my radar today, every time they do exert that control, so many of the times they exert that control, in very consequential ways, they turn down the dial so that you actually can't talk about things you should be able to talk about. Hunter Biden laptop story, lab leak, other things, so much related to COVID, to Russia, et cetera. I mean, he committed what I would call an error there in overstating the amount of Russian involvement and influence. Yes, there was some, but the people on that panel think it was the decisive and only thing that caused that caused Trump to be elected. We know that's not true.
This is why so many people end up being free speech absolutists, not because they don't think that, harassment is a problem, or that the culture of these websites can drive people away if it gets too crazy, or that in the abstract there are rules that we kind of feel instinctively we would like to have in place, but because it is so difficult to come up with a principal metric that isn't being selectively implemented based on your personal ideology. It's why we used to champion the ACLU for defending Nazis' right to march.
Nazis, literal Nazis.
Literal Nazis. And now we have even the ACLU taking different kinds of positions in these moments. It's not, sometimes I think free speech absolutists, people like Glenn Greenwald, people like Matt Taibbi, who catch a lot of flack sometimes for the way they come down on these issues, they're characterized as not caring about the harmful effects of kind of unmitigated, unfettered free speech. It's not that. It's that when you see moments like this, it becomes, I think, a natural instinct to say, I'd rather take my chances with the wolves than whatever this zookeeper they're proposing is going to do.
Because we have to remember about the kinds of things that happened under the previous iteration of the media speech landscape, where there were a lot of guardrails, and you ended up having a lot of sort of fabricated consensus to do horrible things. The Iraq War being a project that takes place in a media environment where what you're allowed to say and discuss is closely gatekept by people who were wrong and to some degree lied about what we should do and what was going on. That's a kind of consensus that is much less likely to be assembled in today's day. Like even with what's going on in Ukraine, I think closer, you can make a better argument for what we're doing there now than what we did in Iraq. But it's being debated. There's a lot of opposition to it.
And you will have Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, going to visit and having these talks in Kyiv, and probably coming back to talk on mainstream media, and it being reported on mainstream media with no conversation about how he was on the, a Raytheon executive and all of these kind of things. And the revolving door is invisibilized on these channels. And again, like I said it up top as a glib kind of joke, but there is a reason these pharmaceutical companies and defense contractors and all of these interest groups advertise on these stations. It is not because anybody watching MSNBC is in the market for a tank. That is not it. But if they buy the ad time, they cannot be critical of those industries that are being advertised on the station. That is how all of this works. And none of that is talked about. None of the background of any of these commentators is ever unpacked. And we're supposed to sit here and believe that they have the interest in the best interest at heart in terms of true, sincere information. Again, the dog-eat-dog world of the internet, it's not always pleasant. We have both been on the receiving end of a great deal of negativity. But if I'm asked what the alternative is, and the alternative space I would like to live in is, there is no way in the world I would want it to move more in the direction of these kinds of networks, even if it means this kind of unknown territory of the hell gates being open.
We can't close Pandora's box back up. We can't. We're not going back to that. It cannot be done. I don't think it would be, if it could be done, I would be against it, but it can't be done. So we should stop pretending we can go back to some previous media iteration where there are much fewer ways to express your mind and talk to people and communicate with people, and we're just all going to trust the three cable stations or a handful of newspapers who have always just parroted, as we're learning now, what the officials think.